The mahogany box sat on my porch like a coffin for something beautiful. I stared at it through the screen door, steam rising from my morning coffee, November wind rattling the windows of my small house in Springfield. 67 years old, and I still felt that childhood thrill when packages appeared without warning. The wood gleamed under the weak autumn sun, gold trim catching light like jewelry. No delivery truck, no signature required, just a box that materialized overnight like a prayer answered by the wrong God. I set my mug down, the ceramic clicking against the kitchen table where Martha and I used to share crossword puzzles. The silence pressed against my eardrums thick as cotton. 2 years since pneumonia nearly claimed me, and the quiet still felt like drowning. The card taped to the lid bore my name in handwriting I'd know in the dark. Emily's script, sharp as her tongue, had become deliberate as her distance. 2 words in black ink. Happy birthday. My birthday. Yesterday. She'd remembered after 3 years of silence that stretched between us like barbed wire. I lifted the lid with fingers that trembled despite my efforts. Inside, 10 Cuban cigars nested in burgundy velvet, each one wrapped in gold bands that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. The tobacco smell rose rich and earthy, carrying memories of summer evenings when Emily was small, sitting on my lap while I smoked on the porch, her tiny finger tracing imaginary maps on my chest. But Emily knew I'd quit smoking. Knew pneumonia had scarred my lungs, left me wheezing like an old accordion. Knew I couldn't touch tobacco without risking everything. The irony tasted bitter as burnt coffee. I carried the box to my truck, gravel crunching under my boots. Richard Hale lived 6 blocks away, still puffed his way through a pack of Lucky Strikes despite his wife's protests. He'd appreciate these cigars, understand their quality in ways I no longer could. His front porch sagged under the weight of 40 years, paint peeling like sunburnt skin. I knocked twice, the hollow sound echoing in the morning stillness. "Hey, Jack." Richard's voice boomed from inside, followed by footsteps heavy as dropped books. He opened the door with a grin that cracked his weathered face. "What brings you by so early?" I held out the box. "Birthday gift from Emily. Thought you might enjoy them more than I would." His eyes widened as he lifted the lid. "Cuban cohibas? Jesus, Jack, these must have cost a fortune." He selected one, rolling it between his fingers like a jeweler examining a diamond. "Your daughter's got expensive taste." "Too expensive for her own good," I muttered, but Richard was already reaching for his lighter. The flame danced in the morning breeze as he drew the first puff. Smoke curled around his head like incense, his eyes closing in appreciation. "Like silk," he whispered. "Pure silk." I stayed for coffee, watched him savor half the cigar before the morning chill drove me home. The empty box sat on my passenger seat, gold trim now seeming to mock me. Emily's handwriting on the card looked different, somehow more careful, as if she'd practiced the letters. That evening, the phone shattered my dinner preparations. Richard's wife, Sarah, her voice cracked like broken glass. "Hey, Jack, something's wrong. Richard collapsed an hour ago. The paramedics, they say it wasn't his heart. They say it was something he smoked." The words hit my chest like sledgehammer blows. I dropped the phone, caught it before it hit the floor. "Which hospital?" "Memorial, Jack. What did you give him?" I drove through red lights, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The hospital smell hit me before I reached the doors. Antiseptic and fear, the same cocktail that had filled my own lungs during the pneumonia fight. Richard lay connected to machines that beeped like digital heartbeats. Tubes snaked from his arms, oxygen mask covering half his face. His skin had turned the color of old newspaper. Sarah sat in the corner, clutching a styrofoam cup that steamed between her shaking hands. "They said it wasn't natural," she whispered without looking up. "Something in the tobacco. Poison." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "The cigars," I said, voice hollow as a cave. "I gave him the cigars." Her eyes found mine, then wide with understanding and horror. "Your daughter's gift." I couldn't breathe. The machines beeped their mechanical sympathy while my mind raced through possibilities, each one darker than the last. Emily hadn't sent me a birthday gift. She'd sent me a death sentence, and I'd handed it to my friend like a wrapped blessing. Outside, November wind cut through my jacket as I stumbled to my truck. My lungs burned with each breath, reminding me how close I'd come to being the one in that hospital bed. The empty cigar box sat on my kitchen table when I got home, innocuous as a jewelry case, but I could smell death clinging to the velvet lining. I picked up Emily's card again, studied the handwriting that had once traced love letters and Christmas cards. Now those same curves and angles formed something else entirely. A signature on my execution order. The phone rang again at midnight. Sarah's voice thick with exhaustion. "He's stable, but they confirmed it. Aconitine poisoning. Something called Wolf's Bane. The doctor said if he'd smoked the whole cigar..." She didn't finish. Neither of us needed to hear the words. I hung up and sat in my kitchen until dawn, staring at that mahogany box. Emily's face smiled at me from a framed photo on the counter. 10-year-old gap-toothed ice cream smeared on her cheek. The child who'd cried when she accidentally stepped on an ant. When had that child learned to kill? Dawn brought Detective Morales to my door, her badge catching the weak sunlight like a mirror reflecting truth. She was younger than Emily, with eyes that had seen too much before 40 and a voice that carried authority like a loaded weapon. "Mr. Carter," she said, notebook already open, "we need to talk about those cigars." I led her to the kitchen set, coffee brewing, while she examined the mahogany box with gloved hands. She lifted it to her nose, sniffed the wood, ran her fingers along the gold trim like she was reading Braille. "Tell me about your daughter." The question sat between us, heavy as a gravestone. Where could I begin with the little girl who'd brought me dandelions? The teenager who'd slammed doors when I wouldn't buy her a car? The woman who'd grown cold as winter mornings after her mother's death? "We haven't spoken in years," I said finally. "Not since she asked me for money I couldn't give." Morales wrote something in her notebook. "How much money?" $65,000, down payment on a house. I poured coffee into 2 mugs, my hands steadier than my voice. I offered 15. She said I was selfish. "And after that?" Silence, until yesterday. She looked up from her notes. "Mr. Carter, I have to ask this directly. Do you believe your daughter intended to kill you?" The words hung in the air like smoke. I thought of Emily as a child, the way she'd curl up against me during thunderstorms, how she'd made me Father's Day cards with crooked hearts and glitter. Then I thought of Richard gasping for air machines, keeping him alive. "I know my daughter's handwriting," I said. "A father never forgets." Morales nodded slowly. "We'll need to test the remaining cigars. In the meantime, I suggest you be very careful about any contact from Emily." After she left, I called Emily's number from memory. It rang 4 times before her voice answered, honey sweet and cautious. "Dad, is that you?" "I got your gift," I said, gripping the phone until my knuckles ached. A pause, then, "Did you enjoy it?" The casual tone chilled me more than winter wind. "I gave them to Richard." Silence stretched between us like a held breath. When she spoke again, her voice carried something sharp and cold. "Well, I suppose that works too." I hung up without another word. The next days blurred together like watercolors in rain. I installed new locks, checked them twice each night. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like Emily's silhouette. Morales called with results. "Aconitine," she said. "Enough to kill a horse. Where would your daughter get something like that?" "She married into money," I said. "Money opens doors you didn't know existed." But the real revelation came from an unexpected source. Daniel, Emily's husband, appeared at my door 3 days later. His face was pale as candle wax hands, shaking like autumn leaves. "Mr. Carter," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder, "I need to tell you something." I let him in, watched him pace my living room like a caged animal. His expensive suit was wrinkled tie askew. Dark circles ringed his eyes. "She's been planning this for months," he said without preamble. Ever since she found out about your life insurance policy. She knows exactly how much it's worth. My stomach dropped like a stone down a well. How much does she know? Everything. Bank accounts, pension, the house deed. She's been through your mail, talked to your neighbors. She even had someone follow you to see your daily routine. The room spun slightly. I gripped the arm of my chair. Why are you telling me this? Daniel's voice cracked. Because I can't sleep, can't eat. She's not the woman I married, Mr. Carter. She talks about you like you're already dead. He pulled out his phone, showed me a text thread. Emily's words glowed on the screen. Once Dad's gone, we're set for life. No more worrying about money, no more pretending to care. The messages continued, each one colder than the last. References to my expiration date, jokes about inheritance timing, plans for spending money I hadn't died yet to leave her. She said the cigars were just the beginning, Daniel whispered. If that didn't work, she had other ideas. I stared at my son-in-law, this man I'd never really liked, but had tried to accept for Emily's sake. Now he sat in my living room, trembling with guilt and fear, telling me my daughter was hunting me like prey. What other ideas? I asked. He couldn't meet my eyes. She mentioned your medication, said it would be easy to slip something extra into your pills, make it look like your heart just gave out. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. And you said nothing. I tried to talk her out of it. Thought maybe she was just angry, just talking. But after Richard, he shook his head. She wasn't upset about him getting hurt. She was angry about the waste. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, writing down everything I knew. Times, dates, conversations. Daniel's testimony. The cigars. Emily's cold voice on the phone. If my daughter wanted to play detective, she'd learn I'd been taking notes longer than she'd been alive. But knowledge without power was just another form of dying slowly. I needed more than evidence. I needed strategy. The next morning, I drove to Jacob's law office downtown. He'd handled Martha's will, my mortgage paperwork, 40 years of legal details that kept life running smoothly. His office smelled of leather and old paper, the kind of place where important decisions got made quietly. Emily's trying to kill you, he said, leaning back in his chair. Jack, that's a serious accusation. I laid out everything. The cigars, the test results, Daniel's confession, the text messages. Jacob's face grew graver with each detail. If this is true, he said slowly, you need protection, and you need to revise your will immediately. She's listed as the sole beneficiary. Not anymore. He pulled out fresh forms. Who do you want to inherit instead? I thought of Richard still recovering in the hospital. I thought of Sarah holding vigil by his bedside. I thought of the community center where I sometimes volunteered, reading to children whose parents worked late. Anyone but Emily, I said. Anyone at all. The new will sat in Jacob's safe like a loaded gun, but paperwork alone wouldn't stop Emily. She'd already shown she preferred direct action to legal patience. I needed to think like her, anticipate her next move before she made it. The answer came in my medicine cabinet. 17 different bottles lined the shelves. Blood pressure, cholesterol, vitamins, the daily pharmacy of aging. Emily knew about my medications, had seen me sort pills during family dinners years ago. Daniel's warning echoed in my mind. She mentioned your medication, said it would be easy. I gathered every bottle, drove to Morales at the police station. Her eyes sharpened as I explained Daniel's warning. We can test these, she said, but if she's planning to tamper with them, we need to catch her in the act. What do you suggest? She leaned forward. Bait. We set up surveillance, let her think she has access to your house. When she makes her move, we document everything. The plan made my skin crawl, but the alternative was waiting for poison to find my bloodstream. We installed hidden cameras in my bedroom, kitchen, bathroom. Tiny lenses disguised as smoke detectors, recording devices smaller than aspirin tablets. My house became a stage set for my daughter's next performance. The hardest part was acting normal. I maintained my routine. grocery shopping, coffee at the diner, visits to check on Richard's recovery. But every shadow felt like Emily, watching every unexpected sound like her footsteps. She called again on Thursday evening. Her voice carried forced cheerfulness like sunlight through storm clouds. "Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation. Maybe I was too harsh before. What were you?" I kept my voice neutral, fingers wrapped around the phone. "Of course. Family should stick together. I was wondering if I could stop by this weekend, bring dinner, maybe talk things through." The invitation hung between us like a spider's web, beautiful and deadly. "I'd like that, Emily." "Great. Saturday evening I'll cook your favorite pot roast with those little potatoes you love." After hanging up, I called Morales immediately. She sounded grimmer than usual. "That's moving fast. She's either desperate or confident. Neither one is good for you." Saturday arrived, gray and cold, November wind stripping the last leaves from my oak tree. I spent the morning cleaning house, a ritual that felt like preparing for my own funeral. The hidden cameras watched my every move, digital eyes recording what might be my final hours. Emily arrived at 6 sharp, carrying grocery bags and wearing a smile bright as stage lights. She looked beautiful. My daughter always had been beautiful, but something in her eyes reminded me of winter mornings, sharp and unforgiving. "Dad." She hugged me, and for a moment I smelled her childhood shampoo, felt the ghost of the little girl who'd trusted me to chase away monsters. "You look good. Are you feeling okay?" "Well enough," I said, leading her to the kitchen. "Can I help with dinner?" "Absolutely not. You sit and relax. This is my treat." I settled into my chair at the kitchen table, the same spot where Martha and I had shared 40 years of meals. Emily moved around my kitchen with practiced efficiency, unpacking ingredients like she still lived here. But her eyes kept darting to the medicine cabinet, calculating distances and opportunities. She filled a pot with water, set it on the stove to boil. Seasoned the roast with herbs that filled the kitchen with memories of Sunday dinners. Everything normal, everything perfect, except for the small vial she palmed when she thought I wasn't watching. "Tell me about Richard," she said, back-turned as she worked. "How's he recovering?" "Slowly. The doctors say it could have been much worse." "Lucky man." Her tone stayed light, conversational. "Lung damage from smoking, I assume." "Poison," I said quietly, "and the cigars you sent me." Her hands stilled over the cutting board. Then she laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Dad, that's ridiculous. You're being paranoid." "Am I?" She turned to face me, knife still in her hand. "You think I tried to poison you?" "Your own daughter." I met her eyes, saw something cold and calculating swimming beneath the surface. "I think you sent me a birthday gift knowing I couldn't use it. I think you hoped I'd try anyway." The mask slipped then, just for a second. Her jaw tightened, her grip on the knife shifted. "You've always been paranoid, suspicious." "No wonder, Mom." She stopped herself, but the words hung in the air like smoke. "No wonder, Mom. What left died stopped loving you." "Finish your sentence, Emily." "Nothing. I just think you're imagining things." But her hands trembled as she returned to cooking, and when she moved to the stove, I saw her slip something into the pot. A pinch of powder from the vial she thought I hadn't noticed. My dinner was being seasoned with my death. "Almost ready," she called, stirring the pot roast with exaggerated care. "Just needs a few more minutes." I excused myself to the bathroom, called Morales from my cell phone. "She's here. She's putting something in the food. We're recording everything. Can you avoid eating it?" "I'll try." When I returned to the kitchen, Emily was ladling stew into bowls. The smell was perfect, rich beef and vegetables that should have made my mouth water. Instead, my stomach churned with recognition. This was how death would smell, like home cooking and love corrupted. "Here you go, Dad." She set the bowl in front of me with a smile. "Eat up while it's hot." I lifted the spoon, letting it hover over the surface. Steam rose like incense, carrying the aroma of my childhood of comfort and safety. But underneath, something else, something bitter and wrong. "Emily," I said slowly, "why don't you take the first bite?" Her smile faltered. "It's your dinner, Dad. I made it especially for you." "Then you won't mind sharing." The silence stretched between us like a held breath. Emily's eyes darted from the bowl to my face and back again. Her tongue flicked across her lips, a nervous habit from childhood. "I'm not really hungry," she said finally. I set the spoon down gently. "Neither am I." She stared at me for a long moment, calculation and fury warring in her expression. Then she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "You're sick, Dad, paranoid and sick. No wonder you're alone." The door slammed behind her with the finality of a gunshot. I sat in my kitchen staring at the bowl of poisoned stew, breathing in the smell of my daughter's hatred. When Morales arrived 20 minutes later, she was carrying evidence bags and wearing latex gloves. "We got it all on camera," she said, carefully sealing the bowl. "Clear footage of her adding something to the pot. Is it enough? For attempted murder, more than enough." But as we waited for the lab results, I found myself grieving not for the life Emily had tried to take, but for the daughter I'd already lost. The little girl with gap teeth and grass stains was truly gone now, replaced by a woman who could smile while serving poison. The hardest part wasn't fear anymore, it was acceptance. The lab results came back on Tuesday morning, ricin. Morales delivered the news with the clinical detachment of someone who'd seen too much evil disguised as family love. "Enough to kill you within 24 hours, she said, setting the report on my kitchen table. "Painful organ failure made to look like natural causes in an elderly man." I stared at the chemical breakdown numbers and symbols that represented my daughter's methodical planning. Ricin wasn't something you stumbled across. It required research, preparation, intent. "Where does someone get ricin quam?" "Castor beans. You can order them online, extract the poison with basic chemistry knowledge. Emily's smart enough to figure it out." The phone rang as if summoned by our conversation. Emily's voice sweet as honey over broken glass. "Dad, I'm sorry about last night. I was upset, said things I didn't mean. Can we try again?" I glanced at Morales, who was already preparing recording equipment. "What did you have in mind?" "Lunch, neutral ground. That little cafe on Main Street you used to take me to when I was small." Memory flash Emily at 8, chocolate chip pancakes, syrup in her hair, laughing at my bad jokes. The same booth where she'd told me about her first boyfriend, her college acceptance, her engagement to Daniel. When I asked, "Today, 1 o'clock, please Dad, I miss you," the words should have warmed me. Instead, they felt like ice water in my veins. Emily didn't miss me. She missed my money, my life insurance, my convenient death. Morales fitted me with a wire small microphone taped to my chest transmitter in my jacket pocket. "She's getting desperate," she warned. "Desperate people make mistakes, but they're also dangerous." The cafe smell hadn't changed in 40 years. Coffee, bacon grease, and pie cooling on windowsills. Emily was already seated in our old booth, wearing a blue dress that made her look younger, more innocent. She stood to hug me, and for a heartbeat I felt the ghost of unconditional love. "You look tired, Dad." "I wonder why." She slid back into the booth, hands folded primly. "I know you think I'm trying to hurt you. I'm not. I'm trying to help." "Help with what?" "Your loneliness, your financial worries. Dad, you're getting older. Things are only going to get harder." The waitress approached, order pad ready. Emily ordered coffee and pie, comfort food from our shared past. I asked for black coffee, nothing else. My appetite had died somewhere between ricin and reality. "You know about my debts," Emily said after the waitress left. "Daniel's business problems. We're drowning, Dad. And you think my death would solve that?" She didn't flinch. "I think your peace would solve everything. You're tired, I can see it. The house is too big, too empty. The medical bills from your pneumonia nearly bankrupted you." I leaned forward. "Emily, are you asking me to kill myself?" "I'm asking you to consider your options. There are ways to make transitions easier, less painful." The words hit like physical blows. My daughter wasn't just planning my murder, she was trying to convince me to cooperate. "What kind of ways?" She reached into her purse, pulled out a small amber bottle. "These are natural supplements, herbal relaxants. They help with anxiety, sleep problems, very gentle." I picked up the bottle, read the handwritten label. For Dad's peace of mind. No pharmacy stamp, no doctor's prescription. Just Emily's careful handwriting promising serenity through chemistry. How many am I supposed to take? Just follow the directions inside. Take them all at bedtime. You'll sleep peacefully, and when you wake up... She smiled, the expression cold as winter moonlight. Well, you won't wake up tired anymore. I pocketed the bottle, my hand shaking despite my efforts at control. You're asking me to kill myself so you can inherit my money. I'm offering you peace, Dad. A dignified exit from a life that's become too difficult. The cafe continued its normal rhythms around us. Families laughing, couples sharing dessert, old men reading newspapers. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that at table 7 a daughter was selling her father's suicide. What if I say no? Emily's smile sharpened. Then things might become more difficult. Accidents happen to elderly people, falls downstairs, medication mix-ups, car crashes. The threat hung between us like smoke. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing Emily's face. Calculation had replaced love, greed had devoured compassion. I need time to think. Of course, but don't take too long, Dad. I'd hate for something unexpected to happen while you're deciding. I left the cafe with the bottle of pills burning in my pocket like a coal. Morales was waiting in an unmarked car, face grim as a funeral director. We got everything, she said. Clear recording of threats, attempted coercion to commit suicide, conspiracy to commit murder. Is it enough? More than enough. We can arrest her tonight. But as we drove back to the station, I found myself thinking about the 8-year-old girl with chocolate in her hair. The teenager who'd cried when I couldn't afford the dress she wanted for prom. The young woman who danced with me at her wedding while promising to love me forever. All gone now, replaced by a killer who shared my blood but none of my love. That evening I called Daniel. His voice was hollow as an empty grave. She told me about lunch, he said, asked me to help with your car. My blood froze. Help how? E-brake lines. She said you were getting forgetful, might not stop in time at intersections. Said a small adjustment would make it look like an accident. The phone nearly slipped from my hands. Emily wasn't content with poison or pills. She was planning multiple scenarios covering every angle. Daniel, you have to help me stop her. I know. I've been documenting everything. Phone calls, text messages, her research into poisons and insurance policies. I can't be part of this anymore. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with the bottle of pills staring at Emily's handwriting. For Dad's peace of mind. Such gentle words for such violent intent. The pills rattled when I shook the bottle, innocent as aspirin. But each one was a small death, carefully measured and lovingly packaged by my daughter's hands. At midnight I made my decision. I called Morales. Tomorrow morning, I said. Arrest her tomorrow morning. Because love has limits, even a father's love, and Emily had crossed every one of them. Dawn arrived, gray and cold, matching the color of my resolve. I watched from my living room window as police cars positioned themselves around Emily's house like chess pieces preparing for checkmate. The morning was still no wind to carry away the sound of doors slamming or handcuffs clicking. Morales called at 7:30. It's done. We have her in custody. I should have felt relief, triumph, some sense of justice served. Instead, I felt hollow as an abandoned church echoing with the ghosts of prayers no one answered anymore. The trial began 6 weeks later. I sat in the front row of the courthouse watching Emily enter in an orange jumpsuit that made her skin look pale as candle wax. She didn't look at me, kept her eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the judge's bench. The prosecutor laid out the evidence with surgical precision. The poisoned cigars, the ricin in the stew, the pills designed to look like suicide, the plot to sabotage my car. Each piece fell into place like dominoes, building an inescapable pattern of premeditated murder. Emily's lawyer tried to paint me as paranoid, delusional, a bitter old man inventing conspiracies to punish his daughter for not visiting enough. But the recordings spoke for themselves. Emily's voice clear as church bells offering me peaceful death in a cafe booth. When they played the wire recording from our lunch, I watched Emily's face crumble. She was hearing herself for the first time, listening to the casual way she discussed my death as a solution to her financial problems. "I'm offering you peace, Dad. A dignified exit from a life that's become too difficult." The words echoed in the courtroom like a confession. Jurors shifted uncomfortably, some turning to stare at Emily with expressions of disgust and disbelief. Daniel testified on the third day, his voice shaking as he described Emily's plans. The insurance research, the discussions of my expiration date, the casual way she'd talked about inheriting everything. She said it would be merciful," he whispered. "Said he was suffering anyway." Emily finally looked at me then, and for a moment I saw something that might have been regret, or maybe just anger at being caught. The defense called a parade of character witnesses, people who remembered Emily as a good daughter, a loving wife, someone who'd never hurt a fly. They painted a picture of financial desperation, of a woman driven to extremes by circumstances beyond her control. But the prosecution had the pills, the chemical analysis, the recordings. They had Emily's own voice selling her father's death like a used car. On the fifth day, Emily took the stand. She wore a navy blue dress, her hair pulled back severely, trying to look like someone's innocent daughter instead of someone's attempted murderer. "I never wanted to hurt him," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I just wanted him to be at peace. He was so lonely, so tired. I thought—" You thought what, Ms. Hale?" the prosecutor asked. "I thought it would be a kindness." The words hit me like a physical blow. Even now, even under oath, Emily couldn't admit what she'd really wanted. She'd wrapped attempted murder in the language of mercy, convinced herself that killing me was somehow an act of love. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, their faces were stone. Guilty on all counts. Emily collapsed in her chair, shoulders shaking with sobs that came too late to matter. The judge set sentencing for the following week, 15 years, with possibility of parole after 12. I watched them lead her away in chains, my daughter transformed into a number in the prison system. Part of me wanted to call out to tell her I forgave her, to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. But forgiveness requires honesty. And Emily had lied even to herself about what she'd tried to do. After the trial, Daniel and I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing air that tasted of freedom and grief in equal measure. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we learn to live with what we know," I said. The house felt different when I returned home. Quieter but not lonely. Clean like air after a thunderstorm. I went through Emily's childhood room, packing away photos and mementos, not from anger, but from necessity. You can't heal while staring at shrines to your wounds. Richard recovered fully, though he never smoked again. We started having coffee on Tuesday mornings, two old men who'd survived their children's definition of love. We didn't talk about Emily or the trial. We talked about baseball weather, the small mercies that fill ordinary days. I volunteered at the community center, reading to children whose parents worked late shifts. Their faces reminded me of Emily at that age, before greed had carved away her capacity for genuine affection. Sometimes I wondered if I could have done something different, been a better father, prevented the poison from taking root. But some questions don't have answers, only acceptance. 6 months after the sentencing, I received a letter from Emily. Her handwriting was the same careful cursive I'd known since she learned to write her name. "Dad," it began. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught, but sorry for what I became. Prison gives you time to think, and I've been thinking about the little girl who used to sit on your lap while you smoked cigars on summer evenings. I don't know when I stopped being her, but I did. And I don't know how to find my way back." I read the letter twice, then filed it away with legal documents and insurance papers. Emily was learning the difference between regret and responsibility, but learning comes too late sometimes. I kept the letter, though, not because I planned to respond, but because it was the first honest thing she'd said to me in years. The garden behind my house bloomed that spring tomatoes and peppers I'd planted with my own hands. I sat on the back porch in the evenings listening to birds and watching shadows lengthen across the yard. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility of time I'd been given back, of life I got to keep living. People asked if I missed Emily, if I planned to visit her in prison. The answer was complicated. I missed the daughter she'd been, mourned the relationship we'd never have. But I didn't miss the woman who'd tried to kill me for insurance money. Love and loyalty aren't the same thing, I'd learned. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. You can grieve what was lost while refusing to enable what remains. On quiet evenings when memories felt like ghosts, I remembered Emily at 8 years old, chocolate chip pancakes and sticky fingers, pure joy over simple pleasures. That child had been real, and loving her hadn't been a mistake. But the woman in prison was real too, and surviving her hadn't been betrayal. Some stories don't end with reconciliation or redemption. Some end with acceptance, with the recognition that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. I said no to my daughter's definition of mercy. I said yes to staying alive. And in that choice, I found something unexpected: peace that didn't require anyone else's death to sustain it. The sun set behind my garden, painting the sky in shades of forgiveness and strength. I sat on my porch, breathing freely, surrounded by the silence I'd learned to love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. But tonight I was simply grateful to be breathing, to be present for the sunset, to have survived love that tried to kill me. And that, I realized, was enough.